Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle D'Amico, and I'm the Director of Continuing Education and Public Programs at the NYU SPS Center for Global Affairs, or CGA. I'd like to thank you for joining us today and provide a quick introduction to who we are for those of you who are new to our community. Since its founding, our goal at the Center for Global Affairs has been to prepare global citizens to make a positive impact in the world. We do this through a variety of activities, including our 2 graduate programs, one in global affairs and our recently launched MS in global security, conflict, and cybercrime. We also offer a wide variety of professional and personal enrichment courses in the areas of global affairs and fundraising, and this includes several professional certificates. And of course, we host free public events such as this that expand upon the critical issues and timely topics that we cover in our classrooms. We'll send a message out to all attendees, so please feel free to reach out with any questions you might have. We've also reserved some time throughout today's conversation for questions from the audience, so please feel free to submit them via the Q&A tool. And now I'd like to turn this over to Clint Mixon, faculty lead of our certificate in cyber leadership, and Dr. Pano Yannicka-Georgis, faculty lead of our MS in global security, conflict, and cybercrime. The floor is all yours.
Thank you, Michelle. So we're really excited to be launching this new program on cyber leadership. Because it really builds on the success that we've had with our new Masters of Science in Global Security, Conflict, and Cyber. So by way of very brief background, the MSGSCC program is one that is designed for people who are not technically oriented, but have a deep interest in understanding technology and also using technical competence in order to design cyber strategy, policy, and help advise leadership on cyber issues within their organizations. What we discovered is that 36 academic credits, 2 years of dedication to a master's program is good for developing certain components of the cyber workforce that are trying to enter leadership positions. However, what we thought was that it is also important to try to scale up and access more target audiences to help introduce more people that are cyber conversant and understand the complexities of both technology, but also how to lead and manage teams of people in the organization, which is how we've arrived to launching the cyber leadership program. So with that kind of very brief history of why CJ is launching this program, I'd like to turn it over to Clint Mixon. We'll be having a very casual kind of conversation between us, but we'll kind of start off with an easy question of, Clint, why do we need leaders in cyber positions, and don't we have leaders in management positions already?
Yeah, so thanks for that question, Pano. There are people there, that's true, but there aren't people there. So we'll start from the basics of that, right? And so Pano has done a lot of research in looking at the current workforce status of the world, and then specifically within the US and the US government when it comes to cyber talent, right? And so we know already that there is a shortage of people who just understand cyber in general, right? So we have a shortage of cyber professionals for that. Then on top of that, right, we start looking at leadership. Leadership, right, as this course will go through and the discussions during the course will focus on, right? Is leadership something that you're born with, or is it something that can be taught? Obviously, I believe it is something that can be taught and learned over time through dedicated, right, lifelong leadership learning. That's really what it comes down to. As I have continued my professional career, I continue to make sure that I am always learning about the workforce. I'm learning about the technology in doing that. However, what we find is that the two communities of people who train managers or do leadership type training and people who are cyber people tend to not be in the same communities, right? They seem to be very different groups of people with completely different outcomes in mind. As I go around and do the various jobs and things that I do in talks, I often say that the number one talent that I bring to the table when somebody wants to bring me in to help is I translate. And I'm translating most of the time between people who are very smart in the technical world, have completely mastered portions of how to do security or how to do specific activities with IT and those kind of things. And I'm translating their language over to those of the leaders and managers of their team, because in most cases, they don't have that knowledge and understanding, while I have both. And so I actually translate between those two communities. And that's, to your point, why we're trying to do this certificate and offering this course to people who take it. And that is, they need to be able to have both communities and their repertoire so that they can speak to both of them in terms that they understand, right? So this course, this certificate is based on helping those who may have just gotten cyber into their portfolio of leadership or management, and or those individuals who are cyber people who are stepping into leadership roles for the first time. Now, to get to your very specific part about questions of leadership versus management, my simple answer to that is the same one I've given lots of people who were my bosses in the past. Clint, what are you doing? Why are you doing these things? I need you to manage these people. To my very quick response to them has always been, I do not manage people. I manage resources, I manage time, I manage dollars, I manage contracts, I manage applications. People have to be led. Managing people is, I think, in most cases, what gets us in trouble, because we dehumanize the person and we manage them like we manage dollars and things like that. And leadership is a human to human interaction, and it takes skills, as I said before, that can be learned and continue to be learned over a lifetime to be able to provide leadership, which is well beyond managing your people.
Yeah, that's very important to think about, especially in the context of, you know, the recent challenges that all organizations have had with regards to great resignations and other high profile things. So in cyber, we already have, as you mentioned, a huge supply problem of talented individuals who are qualified to conduct specific tasks. How does leadership play in retention strategies and kind of ensuring that once you have the talent, they stay?
So I'll use myself as an example in this one, and I fill in the blank for a lot of other people like me. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about people who have done the vast majority of their career or careers as public servants, right? And let's all just be honest with each other here. Public servants don't get paid a lot, right? Nobody ever joined the US government to make money, right? If you want to make money in cyber, you also don't join the US government. So when it comes to why people stay at a position or stay in a location doing the work that they're doing, especially public servants, it has to be more than the money. What's the number one reason they stay? Number one reason they stay is the mission. They believe in helping their fellow man. They believe in helping the world be a better place, to be more secure. They believe that it is something that they offer of themselves that will go on beyond them, because they want the United States to continue to be the world's leading nation in the many facets that it is. And so mission is number one. What's the second one? Well, I'll tell you the second one, because the second one is what we actually hear a lot of times is the number one reason why people leave. And the number one reason why people leave public service in many cases is because of leadership. It's poor leadership. It is uneducated leadership. It are leaders that are not living the values of the organization that they are a part of. They are leaders who are caustic. There are lots of news articles, right, from decades of public service being in the public eye, where we've seen leaders of those kind of public service organizations failing to be the good leaders that the nation needs in those kind of things. So when it comes right down to it, people stay for mission and people stay for leaders, right? Now, what does that mean? Does that mean you're going to keep every single person forever that you get under you as a leader? No, that's not going to happen. However, people tend to come back to good leaders. I myself have experienced that on multiple occasions where people have said, hey, Clint, I know you've moved on. I liked working for you in the past. Do you have any ability for me to work for you now? And typically I don't, because I tend to do public service jobs where I don't have a lot of staff hiring capability. But that's the point. They come back to me for that. In addition to that, leaders don't stop leading the day the person leaves. As I've told many people who come to me and said, Clint, I'm leaving to go to a better opportunity, I've said, that's great. One of the number one things that people who are leaders want for their people is for their people to continue to develop and grow and go on to bigger and better things. Not every organization, be it corporate or otherwise, can offer that next step. And so leaders understand that, and that's why people will continue to stay, because they know the people that are leading them have their best interest at heart.
Great. Yeah. So another question I have. So there's lots of books on leadership. Someone can just walk into Barnes and Noble or go to clicks on leadership books in Amazon and read about 10 principles of effective leadership, a million attributes and keywords that a good leader uses, and that kind of stuff. So I anticipate in the certificate program, you'll be covering a lot of that literature, but what are some of the hands-on exercises that you're going to be using in order to ensure that participants and students in the program can actually apply some of the theoretical work and understand how effective they are and can be as leaders?
Yeah, so one of the exercises that we're going to do during the certificate program is actually a leadership philosophy paper, right? Which is going to be introspective of the student. We're going to do that at the beginning of the course, and we're going to do that again at the end of the course. And the reason for that is as you said, right, there are lots of books out there. We're going to do some reading. There are going to be some books, going to be some videos, right? They're going to be those kind of things. And it's one thing to read those and then just write down the buzzwords on something and that kind of stuff. However, what I'm going to demand of the students is in that actual leadership philosophy, that leadership characteristics, that they explain it to me in their own words, in their actual environments or the environments that they intend to be in. Because it's not about, can you say the buzzwords? It's about, can you actually apply the leadership principles that you're hearing to your situation? In addition, right, there's going to be a tabletop exercise at the end of the course, right? In that exercise, people are going to have to show those characteristics and traits that they've talked about that they believe make someone a good leader. Why? Because leadership is not, as a lot of people unfortunately think, me leading people below me. Leading actually includes all of the people that you work with. It applies to those individuals who do things for you. It applies to those you do things with, so your peers. And it also has to do with leading up. Leading up is probably one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult thing to do, but we find ourselves doing it a lot. And why is that? It actually goes back to your first question, right? We have grown a group of leaders. We've grown a group of people that unfortunately did not learn the basics of leadership. They've learned management-only techniques. And because of that, some of us who are in positions that may be not at the same hierarchical level have to display those traits to them so that they can learn by seeing as well and experiencing that. And so that's the whole thing. Peers in this class will have to do that both through that exercise, like I said, of what's your leadership philosophy, what are those traits? And oh, by the way, I can tell if you just copied it off of the latest news article or the latest, help me book and that kind of thing, versus you taking time to be introspective and look at yourself. Because we're also going to address things like, what's your worst characteristic, right? These are going to be things where people need to go talk to others, because it's very hard for most of us to talk about ourselves in a negative way. However, guess who can talk about us in our negative way? Our family members, our coworkers, our close friends. You have to be open to that criticism, because that's how we grow and learn. And like I said, lifelong leadership learning is a thing. That's a thing. And so we have to do that, and that'll be part of the exercise as well.
Yeah, I'd also like to echo Michelle's reminder in the chat. If any of the audience members have specific questions about cyber dependencies, leadership, the certificate program, anything in cyber in general, please do float them in the Q&A box in Zoom. So as a leader, what's been one of the toughest challenges you faced when it comes to managing a cyber crisis?
So crises, I don't think are unlike anything else. And I think the number one challenge that all leaders face, it's actually funny, I just had a meeting this morning in my current job where we were talking about trying to get cyber effects, cyber capabilities in a defensive situation. And the constant problem that you have is we don't have money and we don't have people. Like that's the going in argument. And cyber crisis are no different. I've been asking in my new role that I just started just over a month ago, how do we respond? What is our response? What is our makeup of our response? And in that whole conversation with multiple organizations that support entities and provide these things, every single one of them has said, you're never going to have enough money and you're never going to have enough people. And that's just the way it is, right? With that shortfall, leaders have to do what leaders do, and that is still find a way to get things done, right? You're not going to have the resources. And so good leaders are found by going, what is the creative ways that you can inspire your team, inspire your peers to find unique ways to come to a resolution of the issue? And it might not be the big resolution of the entire crises that you're encountering, but you're going to have lots of miniature crises along the way that are going to require things you do not have, right? And so people are going to have to step into roles. People are going to have to do activities that may not be completely familiar to them to allow the actual crisis response to go forward and to eventually be resolved.
So people sometimes see that there's, whenever someone sees the word cyber, they immediately jump to thinking hands on keyboard. Someone who might be interested in this course might ask their supervisor, hey, there's a cyber leadership program. And their supervisor might say, well, you're not really technical. There's no reason for you to take it. Can you talk a little bit about the role of non-technical people within the cybersecurity workforce?
Yeah, I think as you've indicated, it's the one that's probably most commonly overlooked, to be very blunt. I find that very interesting though, because when you look at something like the NIST workforce framework, right, one of the top sections in that entire thing, most of the time starts with governance. And governance includes things like policy and strategy and risk. And guess what? Workforce development, workforce management, leadership. These are all the terms that are associated with governance, right? Having individuals who can get on a keyboard and code in whatever language or run whatever application that it might be. We're talking Splunk, we could be talking Wireshark, we could be talking running any number of, very specific programs that a particular vendor might sell. So Crowd this or 40 that, right? You might be extremely skilled in those things. However, right, there needs to be governance about that. How do you set those protocols in your firewall? How do you set those things in your intrusion protection system and your intrusion detection system? Which alerts are you actually going to up-channel? At what point do you notify the leadership, the management, right? These are things that the person on the keyboard is not skilled or trained in. That has to come from somewhere. And they're more than capable of responding to that direction. But without that entire group of governance individuals, you are not going to be able to have an actually successful security program. That's just the bottom line. Just like anything else, right? I'll get into a little bit of international activities right now, right? We're watching Russia do things in Ukraine. Many people felt that conflict was going to be over in very short order. Why? Just the scale and scope and size of Russia and their military compared to Ukraine's military and those things. What we have seen, what the world has witnessed firsthand is the difference in leadership. Right? Both national leaders are confronted with a crisis. One started it, one's responding to it. But now they've been in it for 6 months. So they're both leading in crisis and through a crisis. Zelensky has been the leader that has been very inspirational, not only to his own people, but to many others out there who fear for repression or fear of bullying at the international level. And so that's a prime example of sitting there and saying, okay, when it comes right down to it, right? If we don't have a person at the top of our cyber program giving us that inspiration, letting us know where our North Star is, making sure that we understand the program goals and what the mission truly is, which doesn't come from a keyboard, it comes from leaders in the governance space. And that's why they are so critical to a successful cybersecurity program.
Excellent. We have a question from the audience. So an audience member has asked, for advice on a couple of the best books, philosophy, principles, and practices on leadership, and other books that might address leadership in a cyber-specific environment.
Yeah, so the books that I've chosen so far for the program, and I'm always on the lookout for new and better books and that kind of thing, as any academic is, are going to talk about the number one thing that still resonates in everybody who teaches leadership or runs a leadership program or a school, and that is the speed of trust. Trust is that inherent, intangible coin of the realm when it comes to leadership. Trust cuts both ways. Trust is one of those things that takes a very long time to build. It takes seconds to destroy. And that is the one thing that a leader has to make sure that they are always thinking about. And so there's a book that's been around for a very long time. It's tried and true. It's a multiple New York Times bestseller called The Speed of Trust. The individual who wrote it has continued to just run that practice and build out a practice around his principles of how to build trust and keep trust, and what you need to do, both, once again, for those individuals who may be in lower positions than you, your peers, and your people that you're reporting to and working for. That's one. Another one that's a standard that we'll be using in the program is then also called leading change. Once again, leading is the key word there, and change. Change is constant, but a lot of change can be handled, and leaders can handle it if they know how to do it. The book focuses on someone coming into a new position, and I think that's why it's particularly applicable to individuals who will take this course, because, as I said, the course is designed for those individuals either new to cyber or new to leadership, and the course is going to cover both of those aspects. And so things in that book, Leading Change, Cotter is the author, and he's, once again, as well as the previous author, continued to build an entire practice about leading change, how you do that, what are effective things that happen during successful change, and it's change management. People throw that word around all the time. Oh, change management. I got my manageable checklist. I'm going to do the 13 things on my checklist, and we're going to do our change management process. That's great. What those processes always forget is there are humans involved in this. How are you going to change their mindsets? Maybe the organization has been doing it this way or using this tool for 50 years. That's not going to happen overnight. The other thing that's not going to change is when you bring in something completely new, because new things are developed, especially in the cyber world. Hey, there's a new tool, there's a new method, there's a new application that we can use to do this work and do these efforts. That is leading change. How do you bring that in? How do you bring in a new system? What are those things that you want to make sure that you do to make that change successful? Oh, by the way, leading change never stops, because as soon as you get done with that change, there'll be another change. And so it's a skill set that is really required to do that. And that's one of the books that I really think is extremely well written for new leaders and young leaders as they go out to try and lead in their workplaces.
So you've been in the operational cyber environment for decades now. What's keeping you up at night when it comes to cyber threats?
I think the biggest issue that has continued to just increase during my time dealing with cyber is the fact that the adversaries continue to crowdsource their work, and the crowd keeps getting bigger, right? Everybody tends to view internet penetration and cell phone penetration as a very positive outcome for the world. Clint Mixon looks at it and goes, I'm very concerned about that, because that means that another person who previously wasn't part of that effort may be added to that malicious actor effort. Meanwhile, counter to that, what we see is very chaotic and very inconsistent movement of the defenders crowdsourcing support and defense, right? It took us a very long time as a community to develop the ISACs. Some of those ISACs, right, information sharing and analysis centers, are extremely well funded and extremely, right, good at what they do, which is distributing quality information about the defensive actions required to thwart a particular malicious actor. However, some of them are really bad. And then we have a continued problem where government and private sector, so public and private sector, really struggle to communicate and share information. Meanwhile, chat forums completely going on in the darknet just continue to expand. All those things. Another application that allows point-to-point encryption is added to cell phones to move away from previous ones. And so the bad actors, the malicious actors, continue, right, to get better and better at crowdsourcing the ability to do bad things to good people. Meanwhile, the defenders and those of us who are trying to ensure the continuance, right, of our way of life aren't doing that. We don't understand, and we are failing to do this for a myriad of reasons, which would be a whole other discussion that we could talk about and those kind of things. And there's a lot of work being done in that space, but I don't know that any of it's going to solve this scale and scope problem of defenders versus crowdsourced bad actors.
Thanks, Clint. And I don't see any additional questions from the audience. So before we wrap up, I wanted to see if you had any final thoughts to share that we might not have covered this afternoon.
I will end by saying this. I really do believe that leadership is the one quantifiable difference in the world. When I look at companies that do well or governments that do well, my number one discerning factor when I look at them and evaluate them is always the leaders that are in charge and the leaders that don't get the spotlight. When you start learning about a company's culture, when you learn about a government's culture, how they lead their people, what activities they do, how their people are respected, how they build and keep trust within that organization, to me is the one singular differentiator between success and failure. We just saw today, right off the top of the headlines, right, with Twitter, right? We've got that headline as a thing that happened just today to talk about bad leadership when it comes to those things that that company should be doing for data privacy and data security, and how that wasn't done, and how a person had to go all the way to doing the whistleblower protections to be able to out those activities and those kind of things. So I do think that that's the thing that we need to focus on, that we haven't focused on in the cyber community yet, and it just keeps hitting the news. So I think that's proof enough.
Great. Well, thank you both for a fantastic and informative conversation on these important topics. And thank you to those of you who were able to join this conversation live. We'll send out a link to the recording and more information about both the certificate in cyber leadership and the MS in global conflict security and cybercrime shortly. And we hope that you'll join us in the classroom soon. So thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.